The deception unveiled, the sky above. Beijing turned an unnatural shade of purple as the solar flare hit Earth's atmosphere. Dr. Sarah Chen watched from her laboratory window as power grids across 3 continents went dark in seconds. The electromagnetic pulse was stronger than anything humanity had ever recorded. Satellites tumbled from orbit like falling stars. Communication networks collapsed. Hospitals switched to emergency generators that would only last days. This wasn't just a disaster. It was the kind of event that could set civilization back by decades. Sarah pressed her hand against the cold glass and felt the weight of what was coming. She was the lead scientist at Earth's Defense Research Institute, a position that had seemed prestigious just hours ago. Now it felt like a burden she wasn't ready to carry. Her team had been studying theoretical alien contact scenarios for 5 years. They had protocols, simulations, and contingency plans, but nothing had prepared them for this timing. 3 days after the solar flare, when Earth was still struggling to restore basic services, the ships arrived. They came from beyond the moon, massive vessels that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. There were 12 of them, arranged in a perfect formation that suggested both power and precision. The world held its breath as the ships descended toward Geneva, where the United Nations had hastily assembled an emergency session. Ambassador Theron emerged from the lead ship, with the confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, with skin that shifted between blue and silver depending on the light. His face was angular and symmetrical in a way that seemed almost mathematical. Behind him, a delegation of 6 council members represented different species from across the galaxy. They moved with purpose and ceremony, clearly aware that every camera on Earth was watching. The speech Theron gave was masterful in its delivery. He spoke of the Galactic Council's concern for Earth's suffering. He explained that they had been monitoring humanity's development for centuries, waiting for the right moment to make contact. The solar flare, tragic as it was, had accelerated their timeline. They couldn't stand by and watch a promising young species struggle when they had the technology to help. The aid package Theron offered seemed too good to be true. Advanced power generators that could restore electricity to entire cities. Medical technology that could cure diseases humanity had fought for generations. Agricultural systems that could end world hunger. Communication devices that would connect Earth to the galactic network. Educational databases containing millions of years of accumulated knowledge. All of it offered freely, with no payment required. Sarah watched the speech from her laboratory where emergency power kept her computers running. Her team had gathered around a single screen, watching history unfold. Most of them looked hopeful. A few looked relieved. But Sarah felt something else. Suspicion. She had spent her career studying patterns and analyzing data. Nothing in the universe came without a cost. The aid arrived within a week. Massive cargo ships delivered crates of technology to every major city on Earth. The power generators worked exactly as promised, bringing light back to darkened cities. The medical devices saved thousands of lives in the first day alone. People celebrated in the streets. World leaders praised the Galactic Council's generosity. Religious figures debated whether this was divine intervention. Everyone seemed ready to embrace their new alien friends. Everyone except Sarah's team. She had requested samples of the Council technology for analysis. It was a routine request, justified by the need to understand how to maintain and repair the devices. Theron had agreed without hesitation, even seeming pleased that humans wanted to learn. That reaction alone made Sarah more suspicious. In her experience, people who had nothing to hide didn't act quite so confident. The analysis began in a secure laboratory 300 feet below the Institute. Sarah worked alongside her most trusted colleagues. There was Marcus, a software engineer who could break down any code. Lynn, a biologist who specialized in alien life studies even though she had never seen an actual alien until last week. And James, a physicist whose understanding of energy systems bordered on intuitive. For 3 days, they studied the power generator without finding anything unusual. The technology was elegant and efficient, far beyond human capabilities but functioning exactly as advertised. Marcus analyzed the software and found clean code with clear documentation. Lynn examined the biological components and discovered nothing harmful. James mapped the energy patterns and saw only efficient power distribution. Sarah was about to admit she had been wrong when Lynn noticed something odd. There was a secondary system embedded within the medical devices, so small and so perfectly integrated that it appeared to be part of the normal functioning. It was only visible when viewed at the molecular level. The system was collecting data, not just information about the patients being treated, but genetic samples, DNA markers, biological signatures that could identify every human who came in contact with the device. That discovery changed everything. Sarah's team went back to examine every piece of Council technology with new suspicion. They found similar systems everywhere. The power generators contained monitoring subroutines that mapped energy consumption patterns for every building they powered. The communication devices had hidden transmitters that copied every message sent through the network. The agricultural systems included genetic modification protocols that would make Earth's crops dependent on Council supplements. The educational databases were perhaps the most insidious. They contained vast amounts of useful information, but they also included subtle manipulation programming, ideas and concepts designed to make humans more accepting of Council authority. Historical narratives that portrayed the Council as benevolent protectors who had guided countless species to prosperity. Every piece of information came with invisible context that shaped how humans would think about their place in the galaxy. Sarah compiled the evidence into a classified report. She showed it to her department head, who showed it to the director of the institute, who brought it to the president. Within 48 hours, Sarah found herself in a secure conference room with leaders from every major nation on Earth. The room was lined with signal dampeners and electromagnetic shields, the only place on the planet where they could be certain the Council wasn't listening. The debate lasted 6 hours. Some leaders wanted to confront the Council immediately and demand explanation. Others argued for caution, pointing out that humanity was in no position to make enemies of beings with such advanced technology. A few suggested the surveillance might be benign, just the Council's way of understanding the species they were helping. Sarah listened to every argument and felt her frustration growing. Finally, she spoke. The surveillance isn't benign. The genetic markers they're collecting could be used to create biological weapons targeted specifically at humans. The dependency systems mean we'll need their technology to survive within a generation. The manipulation programming is already changing how people think. This isn't aid. It's preparation for conquest. They're making us dependent before we even realize we're being controlled. The President of the European Union asked the obvious question. What do you suggest we do? Confront them, Sarah replied. Show them we know what they're doing. Demand they remove the surveillance systems and dependency protocols. Make it clear that humanity won't be manipulated. And if they refuse, the President of China asked, then we'll know their true intentions, Sarah said quietly, and we'll need to prepare accordingly. The decision was made to send a diplomatic delegation to meet with Ambassador Theron. The meeting was scheduled for the following day at the Council's temporary headquarters in Geneva. Sarah was included in the delegation, along with the UN Secretary-General and representatives from the 5 permanent Security Council members. They arrived at the gleaming Council building with evidence prepared and arguments rehearsed. Theron received them in a conference room that seemed designed to make humans feel small. The ceiling stretched 50 feet overhead. The chairs were sized for beings much larger than humans. The table was made of some material that shifted and changed color, creating patterns that were subtly hypnotic if you stared too long. Sarah recognized it as another manipulation tactic and kept her eyes fixed on Theron. The Secretary-General presented their findings with diplomatic precision. He showed the evidence of surveillance systems and genetic collection. He displayed the dependency protocols and manipulation programming. He explained that while humanity appreciated the Council's assistance, they couldn't accept help that came with hidden control systems. He asked politely but firmly for the systems to be removed. Theron listened without interruption. When the presentation ended, he was silent for a long moment. Then he smiled, and Sarah felt her blood run cold. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had just confirmed what they already suspected. You found our protocols faster than we expected, Theron said calmly. Most species take years to discover what you found in weeks. Your intelligence was rated highly in our assessments, but clearly we underestimated you. That's actually quite impressive. The Secretary-General leaned forward. Then you admit the surveillance exists. Of course it exists, Theron replied as if the question was foolish. How else would we monitor your development and ensure the aid is being used properly? The genetic collection helps us understand your biology so we can provide better medical care. The dependency systems ensure you don't misuse technology you're not ready for. All of this is standard procedure. Sarah couldn't stay silent any longer. Standard procedure for what? Control conquest? You're treating us like children who can't be trusted with our own future. Theron's multiple eyes focused on her with sudden intensity. Because you are children. Your species has been spacefaring for barely a century. You still fight wars over primitive concepts like borders and resources. You nearly destroyed your own planet through carelessness. The Council has shepherded thousands of species from chaos to civilization. We know what works and what works, Sarah challenged. Making species dependent on you? Programming them to think the way you want? Taking away their choice? Theron stood his full height, making the humans feel tiny. Choice is a luxury afforded to mature civilizations. Young species need guidance, structure, protection from themselves and others. The Council provides that. In time, when you've proven yourselves worthy, you'll have more autonomy. Until then, you'll accept our help on our terms. The Secretary General tried to salvage the diplomatic approach. Ambassador, surely we can reach some compromise. Perhaps reduced surveillance with human oversight. Transparency in the systems you've installed. A partnership based on mutual respect rather than control. There is no compromise, Theron said flatly. You have two choices. Accept our aid with our protocols, or reject everything and face the consequences of your solar flare alone. Your power grids are barely functional. Your medical systems are overwhelmed. Your food supplies are unstable. Without our help, millions will die in the next few months. The Council is offering you survival. The cost is simply accepting that we know what's best for your species. The meeting ended badly. The human delegation returned to their secure conference room and reported what had happened. The Council's position was clear. They believed humanity was too primitive to have a real say in their own future. They would provide aid, but only with control systems attached. They saw nothing wrong with manipulation because they viewed humans as children who needed guidance. Sarah sat in that conference room and watched world leaders grapple with an impossible choice. Accept alien control and save millions of lives in the short term, or reject the aid and watch their people suffer while maintaining independence. It was a choice designed to have only one answer. The Council had timed their arrival perfectly, offering help when humanity was desperate enough to accept any terms. But Sarah saw something the Council had missed. They had underestimated humanity once, by expecting it would take years to find their surveillance systems. They were underestimating humanity again by assuming desperation would override pride and independence. Humans had a long history of choosing difficult paths when the alternative was surrendering their freedom. They had fought wars and endured hardships that should have broken them. They had survived and adapted and overcome challenges that more powerful civilizations might have fled from. The president of Japan spoke quietly into the silence. What if we accept their aid publicly while preparing to remove their control systems secretly? Buy time to develop our own solutions while pretending to comply. It would be risky. The president of Russia added, if they discover what we're doing before we're ready, they might take more direct action. Sarah felt something shift in her chest. Hope, perhaps, or determination. She looked around the table at the leaders of Earth's nations, people who spent most of their time disagreeing with each other, and saw something she hadn't expected. Unity. The decision was made in that moment. Though it would take another hour of discussion to formalize, Earth would accept the Council's aid. They would smile and express gratitude and pretend to be the primitive species Theron believed them to be. But secretly, they would work to understand every piece of Council technology. They would find ways to remove the surveillance and break the dependency systems. They would prepare for the day when they could stand independently, without alien oversight or control. Sarah was given command of the project. Her team would grow from 4 people to 400. Scientists and engineers from every nation working in secret facilities around the world. They would have 6 months to accomplish what should take decades. 6 months to reverse engineer alien technology that was thousands of years more advanced than anything humanity had ever created. 6 months to prepare Earth for true independence. As Sarah left the conference room, she thought about Theron's smile and his certainty that humanity would comply. The Council had made a critical error. They had given Earth their technology, believing humans would become dependent on it. Instead, they had given humanity the tools to understand how Council systems worked. Every surveillance device was a lesson in Council programming. Every dependency protocol revealed vulnerabilities in their designs. The Council thought they were ensnaring a primitive species. They didn't realize they had just given humanity the keys to their own cage. Sarah smiled as she walked toward her laboratory, already planning the work ahead. The Council would learn an important lesson about humans. When you offered them a choice between freedom and survival, they found a way to choose both. The deception had been unveiled. Now the real work would begin. The Order 6 months had passed since the meeting with Ambassador Theron. To anyone watching from outside, Earth appeared to be thriving under Galactic Council guidance. The power grids hummed with alien technology. Hospitals treated patients with advanced medical devices. Cities gleamed with new infrastructure built using Council designs. Human leaders made regular appearances with Council representatives, smiling and expressing gratitude for the continued support. It was a performance worthy of the greatest actors in history. But beneath the surface, something else was happening. Sarah Chen stood in a facility that officially didn't exist, buried half a mile beneath the Australian outback. Around her, hundreds of scientists and engineers worked at stations filled with equipment that combined human innovation with reverse-engineered alien technology. The facility was one of 12 scattered across the globe, each focused on different aspects of the Council's systems. This one specialized in communication and surveillance networks. Marcus approached with a data tablet, his eyes bright with the kind of exhaustion that came from working 70-hour weeks for months on end. "We've cracked the final encryption layer on the genetic collection system," he said quietly, even though they were in one of the most secure locations on Earth. "It's worse than we thought." Sarah had been expecting bad news. Everything they discovered about the Council's systems revealed new layers of deception. "What did you find?" "The genetic markers aren't just for identification." Marcus pulled up holographic displays showing complex molecular structures. "They're modification keys. Once the Council collects enough data, they can deploy biological agents that rewrite human DNA. Not kill us, but change us. Make us more docile, more compliant, more willing to accept authority without question." Sarah felt anger burn in her chest, the same anger she had been carrying for 6 months. How many other species have they done this to? At least 23, based on the genetic templates we found in their database. Lynn discovered the files last week. Each species showed the same pattern. First contact during a crisis, generous aid with hidden systems, genetic collection, then modification. Within 2 generations, the species stopped questioning Council authority. They became perfect subordinates. The implications were staggering. The Galactic Council wasn't just an authoritarian government. They were architects of genetic slavery, systematically modifying species to create a galaxy of willing servants. Sarah thought about the thousands of civilizations that might be living under Council control, their very DNA altered to prevent rebellion. It was a horror beyond anything humanity had imagined. James arrived at that moment, moving quickly despite his exhaustion. "The activation signal just went out," he said urgently. "The Council is triggering their control protocols. All of them simultaneously, this is it." Sarah had known this day would come. The Council's pattern was consistent across every species they had studied. 6 months after initial contact, they activated the dependency systems and surveillance networks. They began the process of turning aid into control. Earth had prepared for this moment, but preparation and execution were different things. She activated her communication link to the other 11 facilities around the world. "All teams, this is Chen. Operation Mirror is active. Execute your protocols." The response came immediately from 11 different locations, confirmed, executing now. Sarah turned to her own team. "Show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." The Council's activation signal spread through every piece of technology they had provided to Earth. Power generators, medical devices, communication networks, agricultural systems, everything received the command to begin full operational control. The systems were designed to give the Council complete access to Earth's infrastructure. They would be able to monitor every conversation, track every person, control every essential service. It should have been the moment when Earth realized they were trapped. Instead, the signal hit a wall. Not a physical barrier, but a digital one constructed from 6 months of intense work. Sarah's teams had found every hidden system in the Council's technology. They had mapped every surveillance node, every dependency protocol, every control pathway. And then they had done something the Council never expected. They had reversed the connections. The mirror protocol activated across Earth simultaneously. Every surveillance device that was supposed to watch humanity instead turned its sensors outward, toward Council ships and facilities. Every dependency system that was supposed to make Earth reliant on alien technology instead created dependencies flowing the other way. Every control pathway that was supposed to give the Council power over human systems instead gave humans access to Council networks. In orbit above Earth, the Council monitoring station received the activation confirmation and prepared to begin their standard procedures. Then their systems went dark. Every screen flickered and died. Every sensor stopped responding. The station's commander, a Council officer named Kelvin, stared at his blank displays in confusion. This had never happened before. In hundreds of previous operations with other species, the activation had always proceeded smoothly. He tried to restart the systems manually. Nothing happened. He attempted to contact the Council headquarters on their ship. The communication channel was dead. Panic began to set in as Kelvin realized they had lost all contact with Earth's surface. Then the screens came back to life, but they weren't showing what they should. Instead of displaying surveillance feeds from Earth, they showed feeds from inside Council vessels. Kelvin saw his own ship's command center from a dozen different angles. He saw secure areas that should have been impossible to access. He saw private chambers where Council members discussed classified matters. On Earth, Sarah watched as her teams gained access to systems that no human had ever seen. The Council's network was vast, connecting thousands of planets and millions of devices. And now humanity could see all of it. We're in, Marcus said with something like awe in his voice. We have access to their entire communication grid. Not just what they gave us, but everything. Their military networks, their political systems, their classified databases. It's all open. Sarah allowed herself one moment of satisfaction before focusing on the next phase. Begin the data extraction. I want everything on their operations with other species. Every treaty, every hidden protocol, every genetic modification program. We need proof of what they've done. The extraction began immediately. Exabytes of data flowed from Council systems into secure human storage. The information revealed the full scope of the Council's activities across the galaxy. 23 species genetically modified for compliance. 47 species trapped in dependency relationships that would take generations to escape. 12 species that had resisted and been destroyed as examples to others. While Sarah's team gathered evidence, another team led by a woman named Kozlov executed the second phase of Operation Mirror. They accessed the Council's own broadcasting systems, the network that transmitted messages across the galaxy. The Council used it to coordinate their operations and maintain control over their vast territory. Now humanity would use it for something else. The broadcast that went out reached every inhabited system in the galaxy. It opened with a simple message in hundreds of languages. This is Earth calling all civilizations. We are transmitting evidence of Galactic Council crimes against sentient species. What followed was 3 hours of carefully compiled data. Video testimonies from the species they had contacted secretly over the past months. Documents showing the hidden protocols in Council treaties. Genetic analysis proving the modification programs. Internal Council communications discussing their methods with cold efficiency. Financial records showing the profits extracted from enslaved species. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Sarah made sure of that. She knew they would only get one chance to expose the truth. If the presentation was weak or questionable, the Council could dismiss it as propaganda. But the data they broadcast came from the Council's own systems, authenticated with their own security protocols. It was proof that couldn't be explained away. On Draxis Prime, the Council's homeworld, the leadership watched the broadcast with growing horror. They had gathered in their secure chamber, expecting to celebrate another successful acquisition of a primitive species. Instead, they were watching their empire crumble in real time. How did they access our networks? Theron demanded, his composed demeanor finally cracking. This should have been impossible. A junior technician, trembling with fear, provided the answer. They used our own technology against us. Every device we gave them became a backdoor into our systems. They studied it, understood it, and reversed it. We gave them the tools they needed. The Council chamber erupted in arguments. Some members demanded immediate military action against Earth. Others insisted they needed to shut down the broadcast before more damage was done. A few, seeing the writing on the wall, began planning how to distance themselves from the scandal. None of them had a solution because the problem was already beyond their control. The galactic response was immediate and explosive. Species that had been under Council control for decades saw the evidence and understood what had been done to them. Protests erupted on 17 worlds simultaneously. 3 species declared immediate independence from Council authority. Neutral powers that had maintained diplomatic relations with the Council issued statements of condemnation. The carefully constructed image of the Council as benevolent guardians shattered in a single day. Sarah watched the galactic reaction from her facility in Australia. News feeds from across the galaxy showed the chaos that was spreading. It was working even better than she had hoped. The Council's power had always been based on perception. They controlled species by making them believe resistance was futile and that Council authority was legitimate. Now that perception was destroyed. But Sarah knew the broadcast alone wasn't enough. Exposing crimes was one thing. Demanding justice was another. She opened a communication channel to every major government on Earth. It's time for Phase 3. The leaders are ready. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in a communication center that would broadcast her image across the galaxy. She wore a simple blue suit, no military uniform or diplomatic regalia. She wanted to appear as what she was, a scientist who had uncovered the truth. Behind her, holographic displays showed Earth in all its beauty, a reminder of what they were fighting to protect. The broadcast began with her image appearing on billions of screens across thousands of worlds. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. I am a citizen of Earth and I am here to deliver a message from humanity to the Galactic Council. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. 6 months ago, the Council came to our world during a time of crisis. They offered aid that seemed generous. We accepted because we were desperate. But we are not fools. We discovered the truth about what you were trying to do to us. We found your surveillance systems, your dependency protocols, your genetic modification programs. We learned that you have done this to 23 other species. You turned aid into slavery, friendship into control. The holographic displays behind her began showing images from the evidence they had gathered. Genetic modification charts, testimony from other species, internal Council documents planning Earth subjugation. For 6 months, we pretended to comply with your plans. We smiled and expressed gratitude while secretly preparing for this moment. We studied every piece of technology you gave us. We found every backdoor, every hidden system, every control pathway. And then we turned it all around. Your surveillance now watches you. Your control systems now control your own networks. Your power over us has become our power over you. Sarah's expression hardened. The Galactic Council has committed crimes against sentient species across the galaxy. You have enslaved civilizations through deception. You have modified the genetic code of billions of beings without their consent. You have destroyed species that resisted your control. These are not the actions of protectors or guardians. These are the actions of predators and tyrants. The displays shifted to show Earth's military preparations. Ships that had been built in secret over the past months using reverse-engineered Council technology, combined with human innovation, defensive systems that protected Earth from any possible attack, weapons that could strike at Council assets across the galaxy. Humanity survived because we refused to accept slavery disguised as friendship. Sarah continued. We chose freedom even when survival seemed to require submission. And now we issue this order to the Galactic Council. You will immediately release every species currently bound by your exploitative treaties. You will provide full reparations for the harm you have caused. You will submit to an independent tribunal that will judge your crimes. You will dismantle your genetic modification programs and restore affected species to their original state as much as possible. These demands are not negotiable. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping but somehow becoming more intense. If you refuse, humanity will take action. We now have access to your networks. We can expose every secret operation, every hidden crime, every classified program. We can disrupt your infrastructure the way you planned to control ours. We have allies now. Species you victimized who are ready to stand with us. We have the technology to fight you, and we have the will to win. The choice is yours, Council. Justice or war, compliance or consequences. The broadcast ended, but its impact continued spreading across the galaxy. In her facility, Sarah received reports of the reaction. 17 more species had declared independence within minutes of the broadcast ending. 4 neutral powers had pledged support to Earth. The Council's military forces were in disarray, uncertain whether they should prepare for combat or stand down. Financial markets across the galaxy were crashing, as investors realized the Council's economy was built on exploitation that could no longer continue. Theron sat in his quarters on the Council flagship, staring at nothing. His career was over. His civilization's reputation was destroyed. Everything the Council had built over 3 centuries was collapsing because they had underestimated one species. He thought about that meeting 6 months ago when the humans had discovered their surveillance systems. He had been so confident then, so certain that humanity would have no choice but to comply. He had looked at Sarah Chen and seen a primitive being whose species was barely capable of space travel. He hadn't seen the intelligence in her eyes. He hadn't recognized the determination in her voice. He hadn't understood that humanity's apparent primitiveness masked a deeper capability for adaptation and innovation. The Council had studied thousands of species, but they had never encountered one quite like humans. Most species, when faced with overwhelming power, either surrendered or were destroyed. Humans had done something different. They had pretended to surrender while preparing to fight back. The Council's response came 3 hours after Sarah's broadcast. It was brief and formal, stripped of the confident superiority that had characterized all their previous communications. The Galactic Council acknowledges receipt of Earth's demands. We are prepared to enter negotiations regarding the terms of compliance. We request a meeting of representatives to discuss the transition process. Theron read the message and felt something he had never experienced before. Shame. His species had committed atrocities in the name of order and civilization. They had convinced themselves that their actions were necessary, that young species needed firm guidance even if that guidance involved deception and control. Now he saw it for what it was. Evil dressed in bureaucratic language. On Earth, world leaders celebrated humanity's victory. Streets filled with people who had just learned the truth about what had almost happened to them. They had been hours away from genetic modification, days away from complete control. Only the secret work of scientists and the brave decision to resist had saved them. Sarah stood apart from the celebrations, already thinking about what came next. The Council had agreed to negotiate, but negotiation wasn't justice. There would be resistance from Council members who couldn't accept their loss of power. There would be complications from species who had been modified and couldn't easily be restored. There would be challenges in building a new galactic order based on equality rather than exploitation. But those were problems for tomorrow. Today, humanity had done something remarkable. They had faced an enemy with technology thousands of years more advanced. They had been targeted for enslavement by beings who had perfected their methods over centuries, and they had won, not through superior strength but through intelligence, determination, and the refusal to accept that might made right. Sarah looked at her team. Scientists who had worked themselves to exhaustion for 6 months. Marcus, Lynn, James, and hundreds of others who had made this victory possible. We did it, she said simply. We saved Earth, Marcus smiled tiredly. We did more than that. We changed the galaxy. He was right. The galaxy would never be the same after today. Species would no longer blindly trust powerful civilizations claiming to offer help. The Council's methods would be exposed and rejected. New forms of cooperation would emerge, based on genuine partnership rather than hidden control. And at the center of it all would be Earth, the species that had been underestimated and had proven that underestimation could be fatal. In the months that followed, the galaxy began its transformation. The Council dismantled their genetic modification programs under the supervision of independent observers. They released species from exploitative treaties and began paying reparations. Theron and other Council leaders faced trial for their crimes. Some were convicted and punished. Others cooperated with investigators and helped build better systems. Earth became a leader in the new galactic community, not because they sought power, but because other species trusted them. They had fought for their own freedom, and then fought for the freedom of others. They shared their technology openly, believing that knowledge should elevate everyone rather than create hierarchies. They built alliances based on mutual respect rather than dominance. Sarah eventually stepped away from her government work, returning to pure research. But she never forgot those 6 months when humanity had stood on the edge of extinction and chosen to fight rather than submit. She never forgot the moment when she had issued the order that changed everything. The galaxy had tried to deceive humanity. Humanity had responded with an order of their own. Justice or war? In the end, the galaxy had chosen justice, but only because Earth had been willing to fight for it. The Council had believed they were dealing with primitives. They had learned the truth too late. Humanity was many things, but primitive was not one of them. When tested, when pushed to the edge, humans revealed capabilities that more advanced species had forgotten. The ability to adapt quickly, the willingness to take risks, the determination to preserve freedom at any cost. The deception had failed. The order had been given. And the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again.